Hello everyone, Earl Henderson, Primordial Defense. Thank you for watching. I have another Monday quarterback video for you. I'm going to play this video and then pause intermittently here and there to talk about things that are going on, to better explain what's going on, and talk about things that I think that are being done right and or done wrong. Without further ado, here we go.
Hello, I'm Sergeant Andy Williams with the Phoenix Police Department Public Affairs Bureau. The information, audio, video, and pictures you're about to see are intended to provide details as we currently understand them of an officer-involved shooting that occurred just after noon on May 1st, 2022. This video may contain strong language as well as graphic images which could be disturbing to some people. Viewer discretion is advised. This incident occurred in the area of 19th Avenue and Southern Avenue. An officer was at a gas station in the area working through an unrelated call for service when he was notified by a community member about a man nearby who was waving a machete. The officer saw the adult male suspect walking south along 19th Avenue on the sidewalk, waving the machete around, before eventually walking into a vacant dirt lot. The officer called for backup, and they tried to keep the suspect contained to the dirt lot, away from other community members. Body-worn cameras are used by all officers assigned to patrol and several specialty units. Per policy, they are worn at mid-torso level and capture the view of the line of sight from that perspective. It's important to note that the camera lens is fixed and does not capture everything seen or experienced by the officer. When activated, both the audio and video turn on. The body-worn camera has a buffer of video without audio for the 30 seconds prior to activation. This feature is designed to capture incidents that happen suddenly where an officer doesn't immediately activate the camera. The Phoenix Police Department does not currently use in-car camera systems. Here's a portion of the body-worn camera video from the first officer on scene. You can see the suspect on the sidewalk with the machete as vehicles pass by on the roadway.
Negative, separate issue. He's threatened a couple patrons of the QT, but right now it seems like a 918 issue, but he's got a machete in his hand. He's threatening passing cars. I don't know how many calls you're going to get on this.
Here's a portion of the body-worn camera video from the second officer on scene. This officer positions herself and her vehicle between the suspect and 19th Avenue in an attempt to keep him away from the roadway, which was busy with vehicle and pedestrian traffic.
I might move my car over there in case he goes that way. Keep him off the street. Like, put my car over there, keep him from going to the street. You stay that way. Get back. Get back. Put it down. Put it down. Drop it. 411, drop it. We're gonna need a nice.
The suspect ignored the officer and continued walking southbound along 19th Avenue and eventually into the roadway. The third officer to arrive retrieved a less lethal stun bag shotgun from his patrol vehicle before approaching the suspect. He gave multiple commands for the suspect to drop the weapon.
Drop the knife, bro! You're gonna get stun bagged! Drop the knife! Drop the knife, bro! Right now! Drop the knife!
And then used the stun bag shotgun when the suspect approached him. The stun bag rounds had minimal effect on the suspect, causing him only to pause for a moment before advancing towards the officer again. At this point, the officer dropped the stun bag and fired his duty weapon, striking the suspect and causing him to fall to the ground.
Drop the knife!
Here is an uninterrupted portion of the body-worn camera video from the third officer on scene.
Drop the knife, bro! You're gonna get stun bagged! Drop the knife! Drop the knife, bro! Right now! Drop the knife! Drop the knife! Get back! Drop the fucking knife! Drop the fucking... Drop the knife!
Here's a portion of the body-worn camera video from the fourth officer on scene, who positioned his vehicle in the roadway to the south of the suspect.
Hey!
Here is another look at the same video, digitally stabilized.
Hey!
The suspect dropped the machete on the ground, and officers were able to move it away as they approached him to take him into custody and begin first aid. The officers continued to provide first aid until the Phoenix Fire Department arrived and assumed care before transporting the suspect to a local hospital for treatment. No other community members or officers were injured during this incident. The suspect remains hospitalized and upon release will be booked into jail for aggravated assault on a police officer. The officer involved in this shooting has been with the department for 2 years and is assigned to the...
All right, so we'll go back. So this officer is dealing with something totally unrelated to this guy, and someone stops by and talks about this dude doing crazy shit. That actually happens more than what you think. Lots of time officers are dealing with something completely unrelated to something big, and it just happens to come across their way. You know, the stars have aligned just the right way, and the things happen right there in their presence. Some people call this being a shit magnet. Obviously, I don't know how much stuff this guy gets into or not, but you know, if he does end up getting involved in quite a bit of stuff, then the term shit magnet would obviously apply here. You know, like out of the whole entire city, you know, where he's at, the one crazy person ends up having to come his way. So this female officer has a good idea to go over there and park her car, and with the hopes of keeping this dude from walking around her car and going into the street and the sidewalk area, and just kind of keep him contained to that lot. But it does not end up working. This car is beat up.
Can you stay that way?
In my opinion, this guy is way too close, and she doesn't even have her gun out yet. This is a big problem to me. She should have had this gun out and ready to begin with. There should have been more of a plan put in place instead of her just going over there all by herself. I don't think that would be the safest thing to kind of do. Because obviously they're dealing with a dude who's not all there, and he's armed with a machete. So, like I said, I like the idea of just trying to go over there to keep him contained to this little lot that he's in, but I don't think that it was done the right way. And also, when he comes closer to her and she doesn't even have her gun out, that is a problem. He could have, if he wanted to, covered that distance in a dead sprint and be able to get on top of her and start chopping at her with that machete and seriously injuring her and or killing her before she can get her gun out and put good, accurate, incapacitating rounds on target.
Get back. Get back. Put it down.
Yeah, he's way too close at this point. Way too close.
Continued walking southbound along 19th Avenue and eventually into the roadway.
And then
southbound along 19th Avenue and eventually
he's still right there swinging this thing around, and she holsters her gun. Again, he could, if he wanted to, turn, go dead sprint towards her, and be on top of her, chopping at her with that machete before she could get her gun out and get good incapacitating rounds, good accurate incapacitating rounds on target.
Into the roadway. The third officer to arrive retrieved a less lethal stun bag shotgun from his patrol vehicle before approaching the suspect. He gave multiple commands for the suspect to drop the weapon.
Drop the knife, bro. You're gonna get stun bagged. Drop the knife. Drop the knife.
Shotgun when the suspect approached him. The stun bag rounds had minimal effect on the suspect.
You can tell
Respect.
that he tried to fire it and it wouldn't shoot, and then he had to tilt the shotgun to visually inspect the safety in order to figure out what was going on with it and get the safety disengaged. So this comes back down to training and familiarity with your tools. Now, obviously, him having that tool, he's been trained in it. He has gone to some type of class to be checked off on being able to have it. But as far as having good recurring training and becoming very familiar with it to where it's muscle memory and he doesn't have to think about how to disengage that safety, that's apparent that he has not had that level of training to be proficient where he doesn't have to look at it. So although he's trained, you could also say that he's not very well trained. This is the problem I have with beanbags. I don't see them as being very effective. There is such a high failure rate with them. Now, of course, it's a pain compliance weapon. The beanbag is meant to generate pain for a person and make them obviously think twice about what they're doing. If they can fight through that pain, if they are committed enough to want to keep doing what they're doing and ignore the pain, well, then they can. They can fight right through it. And obviously, this dude fights right through it. The beanbags have no effect on him whatsoever. Let's see here. Several years back, and I can't remember what year it was, Taser International, which is what they used to be called back in the day, now they're called Axon. Taser International had a 12-gauge taser round, and it was pretty cool. It's called the X-Rep, and it was good in theory, but I just don't think that the way it was designed was very effective, I guess you could say, because it didn't gain popularity for some reason. And it was either because of the design of it, it didn't always have a good success rate with it, with how the little tail end of it would unravel and go onto a person. But that, or it just could have been, that time frame, marketing wasn't all that great, the funding for it just wasn't there, because Taser International and now Axon, they like their stuff and they put a pretty penny on things, and so it could have been more of a budgetary kind of issue, but for whatever reason the X-Rep just never really gained a whole lot of popularity, and so that program or that product went away. I think that with the way Axon has progressed their technology and has made things a lot better, I think it would be a good idea for them to revisit the 12-gauge taser round. And I think that if they did that, they could probably come up with a really good shell payload that would be able to solve a lot of these issues. Now, it's not going to be 100%. It's still going to have a failure rate to some degree. But if you could pump, 3 12-gauge taser rounds at a person, then I think that would have a better effect than just a beanbag hitting them. So if you fire one taser round and it doesn't do anything, you fire the second, and then you might get good connectivity or whatever, and then you would achieve NMI, and then it would go down to the ground. And I believe the X-Rep had I know it had obviously longer than a 5-second cycle on it. I don't know if it had a 30-second cycle on it or not, but it would have longer than a 5-second cycle. And so, let's say it had a 30-second cycle. Well, if you can pop somebody with a 12-gauge taser round and achieve NMI, and that NMI stay for 30 seconds, you can very easily safely approach a person and arrest them under power and render them more safe. And like I said, I just wish that Axon would revisit that. I think that was a really good product, but for whatever reason, it just didn't take off the way I think that it should have. And it's either, like I said, marketing / cost issues, or just the way it was designed. It wasn't always that effective. But And if that's the case with technology the way it is, there's no doubt in my mind they could make one that works really good. So what else is there available here? So they could use a standard taser gun itself, but that would obviously have to mean that one of them would have to get closer to him. The taser gun itself, when it fires the cartridges are attached basically, or the probes, when the probes come out, they're still attached to the gun. And there's a limit on how far those things can go. Usually it's 25 foot for the law enforcement cartridges. So if this dude's 30 feet away and they fire a cartridge at him, well, those probes are just going to reach the end of their wire and then bounce back and hit the ground. Or the wires could break and the probes could continue flying. But obviously, once the wires break, it's not connected to the gun anymore, and electricity is not going through the wires. There are specialty cartridges that you can get that allow you to fire a little bit further, but those aren't always readily available, and those are something that you would put in the gun a little bit later, because it is more of a specialty cartridge that, for most engagements, it's just not realistic to always have that one in the gun itself. Pepperball gun. So I think pepperball gun probably could have been a suitable tool in this instance. Hit direct fire onto him, get the impact effect on it, cause pain, and also on top of that, once those things burst, you're putting OC powder in the air around him. He's going to start breathing it in, getting in his eyes, and start having an effect on him. Is OC always 100% effective? No. There's also a failure rate with that as well. 40 millimeter launchers. 40 millimeter launchers are kind of in the same boat with 12 gauge beanbags. I have not seen a whole lot of videos of them being overly effective. I think there's a lot of people that just kind of brush it off and keep on going, especially with the foam projectiles. It's just unfortunate they just don't work that well. There's a product out there called Bola Wrap. Now, that's not something that I've seen a whole lot of, so I don't know a whole lot about it. I know it exists. I know that it sounds good in theory, but again, less lethal stuff, there's always that possibility of a failure with it. And the Bola Wrap is like this little, it's not even gun shaped, it's like a remote shaped kind of thing, and you can point it at someone, has a little laser beam on it, and you fire it, and basically a long cord comes out, and it wraps around a person's legs, or you can aim it at the torso and it would wrap around their torso and their arms and be pretty tight. So something like that could have been potentially utilized in this kind of scenario, but that's something that obviously not every agency is going to have available to them, because it is a cost thing. Those things aren't cheap. I think they're like, I remember looking a while back, I want to say they're like close to like $1,000 a unit or something like that. And so a lot of agencies have funding issues, especially, with the whole defund the police movement. Some have hardly any money at all now to be able to spend on stuff. They're barely scrapping by. But other places that seem to be doing kind of okay, they're still going to be strapped for cash to some degree, because they just can't get as much money as they need to. And so being able to buy all that extra stuff just doesn't get to happen unless they can get a grant or something like that. So there may be some agencies out there who have it and have had a good success rate with it, but unfortunately, with the way stuff is priced when it comes to first responders, it's just not cheap. And some places just can't afford it, and then some places, they may not have had a marketing or a salesperson come to them yet to kind of do demonstrations and show them, and so they may just have the only exposure to it through videos, and they look at it like, this is kind of goofy, I don't really believe in it. And their mindset could be changed if they had someone in front of them demonstrating it for them. I think that, a Bola Wrap could have been feasible in this kind of scenario, wrap his legs up. But then again, like I said, there is a failure rate. He could have been in the middle of stepping, his legs spread apart, the bowler wrap goes around the legs, and then all he has to do is bring his legs closer together, and then the wrap, isn't as tight as it was. So, those are pretty much all the less lethal options that are available. Now, they could have tried to hit them with some OC, but generally your personal can isn't going to have that reach on it. You can get the MK9 or a larger one that has a larger reach with it, has a better stream on it. But it could have been, obviously you can't detect wind in a video, unless it's strong enough when you see leaves moving and stuff. But there could have been enough wind here to where it wouldn't have been a viable option for them to do it. And then the other thing too is availability. So OC cans have expiration date on them. After a while, you may not be able to get them to deploy effectively, and so riots don't happen all the time, and it can be hard for agencies to justify buying those big-ass MK9 riot cans, and nothing happens, and they sit forever, and then they lose their charge, and they won't be able to deploy correctly, and then they have to throw it away and buy another one. So that's where some agencies are with that. But I think the MK9 could have potentially been used here and reach them from a pretty good far distance. But I think as far as deploying OC on him, I think a pepper ball gun would have been a lot more effective option there. Other than that, that's the only thing on the market right now for less lethal options. I wish that there would be a better push for more effective, less lethal options. Back in the late 90s, there was some cool research done with like these foam weapons. You could spray like a stream of foam at a person, like sticky foam, and you could aim it at their legs or whatever and spray it at them, and it would stick to them and then start expanding. And so they'd like stick to the ground, they fall down, and their legs would be stuck together, and you could spray it at their waistline and chest and stuff, and it would expand and encapsulate their arms and stuff, and they'd be stuck where they're at. That sounds kind of cool, but obviously when you think about it, what happens if you accidentally spray them in the face? their head's going to have this expanding foam spraying around it and then stick it to them, and they're not going to be able to breathe, and they could die potentially. And then the cleanup with it, trying to get it off of them and get them in a vehicle without it sticking everywhere and stuff like that. So there's I think some potential for some better, less lethal options to be out there. Unfortunately, it just doesn't seem like there's any companies doing any R&D on it to make better tools out there. But definitely think that Axon needs to revisit the Taser 12 gauge. So, deadly physical force, that is obviously the type of force that is going to be the most reliable. It usually does a really good job at stopping people, and this officer, he has done his due diligence in trying to use less lethal. Personally, I think that because where you can see it at right here, there's no one around him. He don't have lethal cover. Now we'll back it up. And his view right here, there's no one up here to be able to provide that lethal cover for him. So he kind of broke the rule on approaching a person with a deadly physical weapon and him not having any lethal cover for him. You should not be doing that. When you have a person with a deadly physical weapon, someone needs to be pointing a deadly weapon at them until someone else can get up there with a less lethal weapon. And even when they do get up there with a less lethal weapon, the person with the lethal weapon still keeps their gun pointed at them in the event that less lethal fails. You should never approach a person with a deadly physical weapon by yourself, and then your first go-to option be a less lethal. Less lethals have a failure rate, and they have a good chance of failing. And with a machete, you know, if he got too close and this 12 gauge fails, which it obviously does, he could be getting into a close enough range to where he could go into dead sprint at the officer, cover that distance very quickly, and be on top of him, chopping at him with that machete and seriously physically injuring him and or killing him with it before this officer could get his handgun out and put accurate incapacitating rounds on target.
Knife, bro! Right now! Drop the fucking knife! Drop the fuck!
So he ditches it. I don't have a problem with that, but it could still have a round in there. And you know, what if he got a hold of this thing and then put a 12 gauge beanbag in this officer's face? It could go through his eye socket and kill him. So the thing has a sling on it. He could have, as he was approaching, take the sling and put it around his neck in a 1-point style of configuration. And then, once he needs to go hands off of this thing in transition, he can just let go of it, and he still be able to retain the weapon itself versus just letting it fall and hit the ground. That would have been the better option. But since this is not a lethal weapon, I don't have the biggest gripe in the world with him dropping it and getting rid of it. But if it was obviously a lethal rifle or something like that, no, you should not be dropping lethal rifles and shit to the ground. There's a reason why our long guns have slings on them. Slings are like holsters, so this is a holster in a sense. You need to use it. Like, you wouldn't take your handgun out of the holster and then drop it on the ground and then go to something else. You put your pistol back in the holster and then go to something else. And so the same concept should be with this, which, again, going back into training, this is kind of a training issue to where, probably went through a class, did the very bare minimum, watched the PowerPoint, went out, shot a few rounds, but did not have a whole lot of hands-on with this and utilizing the sling and everything on it to where it would become a second nature kind of thing. And you even see that with actual live rifles in these videos. You don't see people utilizing slings the way they should. If you see someone carrying a rifle around and they're not utilizing that sling when they need to be utilizing it, that's a clear indication they just have not trained enough with that rifle, and that chances are they probably just went through a very basic class and qualified with it, and they didn't really truly fundamentally train with it.
Drop the fucking...
So he fires until this guy drops. So he uses the right amount of force to stop the threat. Could he have fired less rounds? Potentially. But the first 2 rounds obviously didn't make the guy drop. So he fired until the guy stopped becoming a threat. And for him, that was when he fell down to the ground. Some people have this mindset that, this belief that, firing too many rounds is excessive. And obviously these people can never really get a really good definition of what's too many. But generally, if you fire more than 2 rounds, these people, they usually consider that to be excessive. And there's people who think that are also the same type of idiots to think that, you could have shot him in the leg, could have shot him in the arm. Obviously, these people know shit about anatomy and do not understand that there's a big ass artery in your leg, and if you hit that, you can bleed out in 90 seconds, or else they wouldn't say that stupid shit. But they're stupid people. So he used the right amount of force. If he ended up having to shoot more, then so be it. If he had to go to slide lock, then he has to go to slide lock until the threat is stopped. So I have no problem with the amount of rounds that he fired. He fired the right amount that was needed to make him stop.
Roll over.
Now this here, I do kind of have the issue with it because we know that he hasn't fired any out of this and he lays it down. Again, slings are there for a reason. Slings are like you need to be able to utilize those holsters. So I definitely 100% think that he should have slung his weapon and then gone hands-on versus just putting it on the ground. If this guy had become even more combative and more resistant, he could have reached out and potentially grabbed that shotgun. Granted, it's still less lethal, but you can still put a beanbag sock through someone's eye socket and very easily kill them.
The officers continued to provide first aid until the Phoenix Fire Department arrived and assumed care before transporting the suspect to a local hospital for treatment. No other community members or officers were injured during this incident. The suspect remains hospitalized and upon release will be booked into jail for aggravated assault on a police officer. The officer involved in this shooting,
unfortunately, the way the criminal justice system is, he probably won't do a whole lot of time. And, you know, with the potential of there being some mental issues there, probably even higher chance this person will spend a whole lot of time locked away and will probably be back out walking on the streets a lot sooner than what anyone thinks.
Has been with the department for 2 years and is assigned to the South Mountain Precinct. This incident is the subject of both an internal and a criminal investigation, which will be reviewed by the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. Conclusions about whether the actions of the officers are consistent with department policy and the law will not be made until all the facts are known and the investigation is complete.
Alright, so that's it. If you like what you hear and see, go ahead and give me a like and a share. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more Monday quarterback videos. Earl Henderson, Primordial Defense, thank you for watching.